Hi, my name's Richard. I wanted to share my Christian testimony. I was saved when I was 26 years old. I was brought up in a Christian family in Perth, and well, at least it was a church-going family. My mum and my dad didn't really get on. They went to church, and I was taught to try and be a good person. I went to school and tried to avoid the sins of, being, smoking or chasing too many girls or getting drunk. And while my brothers got into trouble at times, I kind of kept out of the way. The way I dealt with family conflict was not by dealing with it in good ways, but by just trying to be successful. So I went to school and I was always trying to be the best at this or that. I did music and a lot of academic kind of achievements. And I thought, I was, at a young age I wanted to be a doctor. From the age of 12, I decided I wanted to be a paediatrician. Eventually I got into medical school. Went to medical school, and before that I didn't really drink or do anything too sort of frivolous. I was pretty straight. But the longer I was at university, I think the more pride crept in, and the more I began to drink and go to parties and had relationships that were not honourable or good. And my relationships were getting shorter and shorter. At university, I went from a private boys' school to where there was just plenty of girls everywhere, so that was a real distraction for me. And I think probably between pride and lust, there were the areas that I really spent a lot of my time and energy. Anyway, what happened when I was 24 was my parents divorced. My mum came to a point where she was just very depressed, and she basically had a breakdown. And I didn't really know how to deal with that. I'd never talked about my feelings or my emotions. And I went to a counsellor to try and talk about my feelings, but I didn't know how to do that. So that basically turned into a panic attack. But he was kind, and he said to me, why don't you come back to a group another time? And eventually I went back to group, and it was group therapy at a Bible college called Journey of Men. And in that group there was 8 or 10 people sitting in a circle, and the aim of the group was just to share your heart in where you're at in your life, and the other guys were invited to interact with that. To me that was death, because at medical school I'd learnt facts and I'd learnt answers and things all to do with my head, but I'd never learnt how to speak out of my heart. So for the first time in my life I found myself failing, like I just didn't know what to say. I didn't have the tools to interact with people in a way that expressed hope or genuine love or concern for somebody. So we'd go around the group sort of interacting with one, and it would come my turn and I'd just be sweating and I'd be thinking, what do I say here? And the other guys in the group, particularly the leaders, knew just how to unravel me. They knew how to ask me questions that I just didn't know how to answer. I don't know whether that was just their wisdom or God was working through them, but whatever the case, every week on the Monday I'd fall apart, and it would take me all week to put myself back together, and I was just confused. By this time I was working in a hospital, so most days before I went to work I would laying in my bed, and I would just try and figure out what was going on. I just didn't know. So one day, a Wednesday morning it was, I'd been particularly, I think I'd been quite rude to somebody in the group on the Monday night. I'm lying in my bed and I just had this thought, well, what if what the guys are saying is true? Now the guys in the group had been saying to me that I was quite predatory in my nature, which is a horrible word, but looking back I took advantage of other people to make myself look good. I was getting into meditation and Buddhism. I was reading books like How to Win Friends and Influence People or The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I was very enclosed and self-directed, just very self-interested, really. And when they said that I took advantage of other people, that triggered me to think of the last party I'd been at. There was a get-together of students and young doctors, and I'd just been a real jerk. Without too much detail, I just really used someone, and I just realised that it wasn't right. And it was like this little light bulb went off in my head. I just went, oh, you know, I'm a sinner. I'm a jerk. I've done something wrong. And it was wonderful because for the first time in my life, I was prepared to confess who I was. I think as a doctor, I had one persona for the public and one persona for me in private. A lot of things were hidden. So anyway, I went to the group the following. We had a breakfast on the Saturday morning, and I went to that group and I said to the guys, I was really nervous, and I said, guys, can I have 5 minutes? And they said yes, and I said, it's true, I'm telling lies, I'm getting drunk, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And I confessed all my sin. And look, I don't know whether they thought that it was genuine. They maybe thought I was just acting up a bit, but I knew that day, after I left, on that day I went home and I danced around the lounge room. I just knew that I was saved. I turned on Eric Clapton's If I Could Change the World. It was a lounge room with a big green carpet and this fancy stereo system, and I'm going, and I just knew I was saved. And I went back to the last group, which was on the Monday night. It was the sort of farewell, and I was totally different. Before, I was hesitant to open my mouth. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what was the right thing to say, but now you couldn't shut me up. I could see other people's issues. I could speak into them. I wanted to help them, and one of the counsellors said to me, hey Rich, just slow down a bit. And I said, I've got to help him. I'm saved. And so right on, like, I wasn't looking for God when I got saved. And that's the wonderful thing about my story. I just kind of like God ran over me. And I love it because I truly know that if God hadn't found me, I wouldn't have found him, because I wasn't looking. I was just muddling along and trying to be the same old person I'd always been, trying to get it right. And God saved me. He brought me to know that my sins were, firstly, he brought me to know what my sins were, and secondly, he brought me to know that I was forgiven. So in sharing my story, I think, although I was never taught this Bible verse, I think this one Bible verse summarizes where I was at, and it's this. It's 1 John 1 verse 9. If we confess our sins, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sins and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. What an amazing thing just to be able to say to God, I'm a sinner. And just not I'm a sinner, but to say, I know what my sins are. And then in that very process to be forgiven for the very thing that you feel worst about. It's amazing, and that's what happened to me. And I really do glorify God for the work he's done in me. He's radically changed me. I'm a very different person to what I used to be. And I know that, if he hadn't changed me, I don't know what had happened. Look, maybe I'd been married a couple of times by now and still just chasing for things that really didn't matter. But instead I'm married, I've got a wonderful wife and 3 beautiful daughters. And I just love living for God and serving him. I'm saved and I'm on the road to glory, and I really hope and trust that he will keep me on that road. And I pray that this testimony is a blessing to you.